Welcome to Crisis in Perception, where we examine the systems shaping our world. Today, we're jumping into the structure of the system laid out in John Coleman's work, The Club of Rome. Think of this as a compressed structural companion, really just mapping out the core arguments. So, just to be crystal clear, this isn't a summary of the book, and it's definitely not advice. What we're doing is focusing entirely on the architecture of the narrative itself, how it's built and how its internal logic actually functions. All right, so to really get a handle on this narrative, we're going to trace its logic step by step. First, we'll look at the hidden governance system it describes. Then we'll dig into the incentives that are supposedly driving it. From there, the outcomes it's meant to create, then how the whole belief system keeps itself going, and finally, how it all plugs into broader global systems. All right, so Section 1, a hidden governance system. We're going to start right at the core of the argument. The source material basically says there's this hidden, top-down system of global governance running the show. And right at the heart of this, according to the text, is the Club of Rome. Now, it's not just described as just some ordinary think tank. No, it's painted as a key operational arm of a much, much larger structure, one that's supposedly cooking up plans for the whole planet. And here's how the chain of command is laid out in the book. It's a really clear hierarchy. You've got this elite group at the very top, the Committee of 300. The story goes, they direct the Tavistock Institute, called the mother of all brainwashing institutions, which then hands the Club of Rome its marching orders to execute the grand plan. And the end goal of this whole system? Well, according to the author, it is incredibly direct and, pretty extreme. We're not just talking about influence here. We're talking about a total restructuring of society into what the book calls a new dark age of universal slavery. Okay, so that's a massive claim, which brings us to the next logical question, right? Why? What's the incentive for all this control? Well, the book argues the motivation isn't really money or power in the way we usually think about it. It's something more fundamental, an ideological revolt. The main target? The entire modern order, specifically what the author calls its two main pillars, Christianity and the industrial-based society of the United States. So the way the narrative frames this is as a total clash of worldviews. Christian Western civilization is seen as the #1 threat, not because it's flawed, but because its core values, things like individual freedom and faith, are completely incompatible with the occult theocracy this group supposedly wants to build. Okay, so if that's the why, the incentive, then what about the what? What are the predictable, real-world results of all this? The book gets pretty specific. The framework described here kind of has two faces. On the surface, you have the stated public goals, things we all hear about, right? Environmentalism, global cooperation, economic stability. But the book argues that's just a cover for the real goals: deindustrialization, population control, and locking in a zero-growth society. And these alleged hidden goals, they're said to show up in some very specific policies. For instance, the push for a post-industrial world, holding back things like nuclear energy, the erosion of Western ideals like family and national pride, shaking up currencies, and the big one, depopulation through programs like Global 2000. Yeah, you see that number right, 2 billion. That's the number of people the book claims the Global 2000 report called to be wiped out by 2010. Now, a claim that staggering really forces us to step back and ask a critical question about the narrative itself. So that leads us to a really important part of this analysis. With claims that are, that extraordinary, how does a belief system like this even survive, let alone get stronger when faced with skepticism? So how does this narrative persist? Well, the answer isn't just about people believing things. It's about the structure of the belief system itself. The whole narrative is built in a way that kind of insulates it from outside criticism. And probably the best way to think about this, structurally, is as a closed-loop circuit. What does that mean? It means it's a self-reinforcing system. Any evidence that seems to contradict the story, like opposition or denial, doesn't weaken it. Instead, it gets reinterpreted as proof of the system's hidden power. Someone denies it, that's just proof of a cover-up. There's no evidence, that's proof of how secret they are. And this is where you get a real crisis in perception. Take this example from the text. It claims the Club of Rome's very existence was denied for 25 years. Now, in this closed-loop logic, that's not evidence that it didn't exist. It's actually twisted into powerful confirmation of just how secret, and therefore how powerful, the group must be. See how that works? Okay, on to our last section, interconnected global systems. The final piece of this whole structure is understanding how this supposed hidden system plugs into the world that we can all see. The book's argument is that this hidden system isn't operating in some kind of vacuum. It's supposedly working through a huge network of institutions we all know. I mean, really well-known organizations. We're talking NATO, NASA, the Aspen Institute, Global Financial Systems, mainstream media, the Stanford Research Center. All of them are named as being either controlled or influenced to carry out this agenda. So when you step back and look at the architecture of it all, what you see is a completely totalizing system. You have a central, hidden authority. It has a clear incentive. That incentive produces predictable outcomes, and the whole thing is held together by a self-confirming logic. That structural clarity is really the main takeaway here. Crisis in Perception examines how systems shape belief and how better tools help us see clearly. This project is free and publicly accessible. If you'd like to support the time, tools, and research behind Crisis in Perception, you can become a supporter on Patreon. For a longer audio-based analysis of this topic, see the deep dive linked in the description. If you enjoy this kind of systems-level analysis, please like, subscribe, and comment with books or topics you'd like us to explore next.